Hello, Figaholic friends. Well, we decided finally to pick enough fruit to make some jam, and I think we have enough here. We have, somewhere at least 40 pounds, I think. I'm going to make two different kinds, a general blend of mostly berry flavor type fruits. And in this tub here, we have a combination of many different fruits here, and we can't see them all. Of course, it's about 8 inches deep at the peak there. But we have some black Madeira and Figo Preto. We have some Panache, some Bordeaux Rosa. Let's see, I got some Valle Negra in there, Bordeaux Blanca Negra, some Ziti, some Emmeline's Purple, some Socorro Black, some Hativ de Argentel and Malta Purple Red, some Black Bethlehem. I don't think I was going to pick some Planera. I think I skipped that. I'm looking at a list of what I was going to pick. Some Burgessote Gris, some Col de Dame Nord. Also, I got some Col de Dama Gigantina, which there's quite a bit of that on top right here. Some of these dark striped fruits, the purple and green stripes, those are the Bordeaux Blanca Negra. I've got some Italian 258 and Genovese Nero in there. I think that's probably about covered it. I might have picked a couple of other things that I just saw and looked good along the way. And on this container over here, I have a much smaller amount. These are all Villette de Soles, Burgessote Nord, and Nord de Barbentane. I'm going to make a separate batch of just those specifically because, as I mentioned in another video, when I made some varietal jams in 2017, I really enjoyed this type of, a lot, and I hope to plant some more Villette de Soles specifically so I can make some large batches of jam with that because I really like that. Christine Faber, I think is how her name is pronounced in France, and that's the variety she uses for her famous jams. And I think it's a very good fig for that purpose. So anyway, this is what we start with. I'll show some steps along the way of us making fig jam. This is going to be several batches of jam. I'll probably prepare some of this and refrigerate it and make it over a day or two, but I'll just show one batch being made. Thanks for watching. Okay, after picking the fruit and making sure we have all our supplies that we need, the first step is going to be to wash our canning jars. You might think that go ahead and get started right away preparing the fruit, but let's get the jars washed and rinsed and out of the way so that they're just ready to go when they're ready to be used. So we wash these and just let them partially dry. You'll see later that it's not that important there to get them dried all the way, but we just want to get them washed and out of the way. Okay, now I'll do a segment showing the materials that we have on hand to prepare our fig jam. We have a cutting board and a paring knife. We'll cut our figs in half to inspect them, make sure that there's not any spoiled figs. Today was 101 degrees, and many of these figs are very ripe. It's been, I think, 3 or 4 days since we picked fruit for market, so a lot of these are very ripe. And I don't want to put any spoiled figs in our jam. A mincer that I bought on Amazon, nothing special about it. It's got 1/4 inch space blades here. It also comes with 1/2 inch spacing blades. Some of the skins of the figs are tougher than others, and I don't really want big tough pieces of skin in the fig jam. I use both 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch before, and I just prefer the 1/4 inch. Some silicone mitts back for handling the hot canning jars. This is a cookbook by Rachel Saunders, and I took a workshop with Rachel a couple years ago. This is a smaller book. She has a larger one also. This is an adequate book for making fig jam, and it's got a simple title there, I Love Jam. And so we've got a pyrex measuring cup and stainless steel funnel for handling the hot jam mixture and pouring into the canning jars. Some lemon juice. You can use fresh squeezed lemons if you have them available. I haven't found any difference personally. A mixing container for mixing the fig jam mixture. Some cane sugar. The recipe we follow is about 2 parts of fig fruit to 1 part of sugar. You can use a little bit less, but with going less, the food isn't going to be preserved as well, and the texture isn't as good. I know we like to have less sugar in our diets, but we don't eat jam in large quantities normally anyway. Fig fruit are back there, of course. Here we have 5 teaspoons, and right after this video segment, and those will go into the freezer, and I'll explain that why later. Here we have a copper jam pan, and this, I think, makes a huge difference in the quality of jam. The copper conducts heat very well. It allows for a very intense cooking of the fig jam mixture, and it's surprisingly very non-stick. I have a silicone spatula here. There's not much stirring that's required. It churns by itself pretty well in the beginning and middle stages of the cooking. But a lot of recipes or cookbooks will say to use a non-reactive metal pan, but if you mix the sugar with the jam, as I've read anyway, it does not cause a problem if you mix the sugar with the fruit before putting into the pan. And I'm not sure how to pronounce the company's name. Maviel makes copper jam pans to this day in France. I have a large 19-quart Maviel pan, plus this one here I bought later on eBay. Is believed to be over 100 years old, a little bit heavier than my Maviel. The new pans, they appear to be hammered into shape, but that's just machine done. And we saw in Portugal when we were there last year in the Algarve region, a coppersmith making pans by hand, hammering them into shape by hammer. These older ones are higher quality. You can't buy factory-made ones of the same quality. The lids of our canning jars, those have been washed and dried already. A cooling rack, and our canning jars are on a cookie sheet, and we don't use a hot water bath. It'll go into the oven that's heated at 225 degrees. We'll put these into the oven shortly before we start cooking the jam mixture, because 225 degrees sanitizes them more than boiling water easily, and we can just leave them in there for quite some time until we're ready for pouring into them. We need to take them out a few minutes before, and I'll explain that later. So those are the supplies we need. I don't think I've left anything out. I might need a ladle for putting the jam into the large pyrex dish. So let's check back after we get going with the jam. Oh yes, one more thing I forgot. We need a scale. And I'm going to use 10 pounds of fig fruit and 5 pounds of sugar. Really depends on the size of pan you have available and the size of jars you're using. So we need a scale to measure it out. We don't measure out by cups. This is much easier measuring by weight. Okay, so here I've washed some of the figs that we're going to use for our fig jam, and I've cut off the stems off of them because some of those are tough. Some would be okay, but like that is a pretty woody stem, and I don't want those. And they're mostly interested in some of the skin and the pulp. And so you can see some of these are very ripe. This is, I believe, a Coldodama gigantina, very ripe. And I cut them in half, and I place usually 2 halves on this mincer, and it goes down with a fair amount of force. And this isn't full yet, but this is what it looks like after I mince them. And so they're still fairly good sized skin pieces intact. And I'll put it into our measuring bowl, our mixing bowl, and I'll weigh out 10 pounds. So I'll work on this for a while and give you an update later on. Okay, just a quick update. Because of the larger 12-ounce jars we're using and the large quantity of fruit we had remaining, I decided to do a larger batch. Our pan is a large pan. It does take longer to cook larger batches, but I ended up with 13 pounds of fig pulp and 6.5 pounds of sugar. I'll mix these together now and then put them into the jam pan, and then add the lemon juice. And I won't bother showing a video of that addition there, but lemon juice in the recipe book, it talks about a certain quantity, and when I took the workshop with Rachel, she explained just keep adding lemon juice until you can just begin to taste it. It adds a brightness taste to the flavor. The lemon juice, besides some flavor, it helps also in the preservation of the fruit. The acidity helps, I believe, prevent botulism. So anyway, so we'll mix these together, and I'll show the next step when we have it in the pan and starting to cook. Okay, now we're ready to start cooking our jam, and I ended up looking at the recipe, and it had for a 5-pound batch of fruit and 2.5 pounds of sugar, it had a 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup of lemon juice. So I went ahead and just tried at 1.5 cups of lemon juice, which is the lower end of that range. Usually I end up putting more, but I thought that it was good at that. One thing I should point out is that you should be tasting that when the mixture is cold. Once it gets warm, you can't really get an accurate sense of the taste then. So you do it before you start cooking, and you don't add any more after that. The other thing I mentioned, or like to mention, that we don't use pectin. Pectin might be necessary, or is necessary for some fruits, but it's, I think, probably greatly overused by many people. And the use of a copper pan helps you cook down the fruit mixture much more condensed. The flavors are more condensed, intense flavor, and it thickens up. And if you use pectin, it's going to thicken up quicker, but the flavor isn't going to be intense. Also, pectin, as I understand, is a type of starch. It adds some slimy texture to the jam, which maybe some people are accustomed to, but it's not really the best for jam. So some fruits, I think, for instance, strawberries, maybe you need to add pectin, but most fruits you don't need to. If you use a copper jam pan, you can cook it down. Very intense flavor, and it's, I think, roughly about 1 pound of fruit gives me an 8-ounce jar. So something like that. I can't remember. We got 12-ounce jars. We'll find out what the quantity is when we're down here. But we got to get cooking. This is a bit thicker than I would like. 3.5 inches deep. Probably 3 inches deep. It does take quite a bit longer to cook down when it's that thick. But we better get going. So we're still in the early stages of cooking down the fig jam. Later on you can see the line along the edge of the pan where it's cooked down to. But there's some foam there that's not usually too much of an issue with fig jam that I've made before, that can get stirred back into the mixture as the cooking slows down. But one thing I'd like to mention too is that we don't really need to do much stirring, and the main thing is just checking to see whether there's any sticking going on. There is a little bit, and I'm a little bit surprised. I think that this is somewhat because this is a bigger batch than I usually cook. It's thicker, so I'm going to have to cool this down. It's not burnt, but the sugar. So the main thing is pushing just along the edge of the bottom of the pan. And some other jam I've made before when I had actually something start to burn. Let me just look. There is some burning maybe going on here. No, that's skin there, I think. I might need to get my other pan. What we can do if there's any burning going on is put this mixture into the other pan and clean up this pan. So I've not cooked this deep of a mixture before, so that's a bit of a problem. I measured or weighed the fruit there that I took back outside. I put it in a cooler. I had 50 pounds of fruit total, so I just have a lot of fruit, and I'm trying to push it a little bit too much, cooking too much at one time. But I don't think that there's any burnt pieces here. But we don't need to stir it constantly. It's mostly checking to see if anything is sticking to the surface. So we might have to cook this for about an hour. Okay, the jam has been cooking for about an hour now. A little bit longer than normal because of the large batch that we're making. So here's one of the spoons out of the freezer. We're going to put it here and let it set for a while and see how thick it is and it's ready to bottle up. It's cooked down about maybe a little over 2 inches deep at this point, and I think we started out with somewhere between 3 and 3.5 inches. We're having to stir more than we do for a normal batch, just because a large quantity that we put in the pan, it doesn't churn as much on its own. We gotta prevent it from burning. We've had some sticking on the bottom, and so I had to lower the temperature. Just push it across with a silicone spatula gives us an idea if we need to turn down the temperature. As it gets thicker, it's more likely to stick to the bottom. So we'll check the spoon of jam after a couple of minutes, maybe 2-3 minutes, and see how thick it is, if it's ready to bottle up. Okay, it was fairly thick when we tested the jam in that chilled spoon. Another way to get an idea is, the bubbling pattern, it stays fairly thick still, but also if you push across, it makes ripples all the way across, well ahead of it. Gives you an idea it's getting thick enough. So I think that we've cooked it down enough, down to about 2 inches deep, which again, this is a bigger batch than what I would normally cook, just because we have so much fruit that I wanted to turn into jam. I'm going to turn it off, let it set for maybe 5 minutes, because it'll still steam off some more and get a little bit thicker. But we don't really need to apply more heat to it at this point. I've been stirring it down, or wiping it down here on the edges with a spatula. And so we'll pull the jars out of the oven at this point and let them cool down, because if we put the jam into the jars at 225 degrees, that's going to be a bit too hot, and it can actually start the jam boiling again right inside of the jar and create some bubbles along the edges, and maybe some foam and so forth. And so we need to let them cool down. The whole point of that is to preserve sanitize the jars, but also get them up to a similar temperature of the jam, but they're a little bit hotter at this point at 225, so we'll pull them out. We're not going to turn the oven off at this point because we're going to put them back in the oven for 15 minutes after we bottle up the jam. Okay, we've had the burner off now for about 5 minutes. The jam is pretty thick, but it's still quite hot. Here's a teaspoon that was in the freezer, so it's quite thick, and it's still cooling down more. So now I'll bottle up some of the jam. My trusty assistant Linda there will take over on the camera. So I'll ladle jam into this pyrex measuring cup just to make it easier pouring larger quantities into several jars. I won't show the whole process because I'll have Linda help me wipe off the jar lids some, but we get it close to the top. This funnel, right now in the funnel, it's higher than the top of the jar, but if I pick it up, it should drop down. It might be a little bit too full, but it's okay. Sometimes we can adjust some by spooning some more in or taking some out. We're trying to keep the rim of the jar clean without dropping too much onto the oven down, or the stove top down below that Linda just cleaned. So at this point, we'll fill up all the jars, clean any jam that maybe got on the rim of the jar, put the caps on, and then we'll put it into the oven for 15 minutes. And so I'll show that stage later. So now we filled the 12 jars with jam near the top, maybe 3/8 of an inch from the top, and put the lids on and the screw caps and tighten them. I used the silicone glove to hold onto the hot jars and tighten them by hand. And so now we'll put it into the oven at 225 degrees for 15 minutes. What that does is sanitize the lids there, which we didn't do earlier. They weren't in the oven. Too hard to handle those if they're hot, and that sanitizes them as effectively or more effectively than a hot water bath, and don't have to deal with any steam, no splashing hot water. Also, we can deal with larger quantities. If I had 2 cookie sheets full of jars, I could do 2 cookie sheets at one time, whereas it's hard to process that many jars at the same time in a hot water bath. Again, we'll put these in the oven, take them out and put them on the cooling rack, let them cool overnight. Okay, so we're all done now. The jam has been in the oven for 15 minutes and pulled out, and it's cooled down some. I need to let it set still for a while still, but this is the final product. We ended up with more jam than I expected, and I could have cooked less fruit. I was hoping to get 12 jars. I ended up needing to wash 6 more jars. So we're all done now. Thanks for watching.